Welcome to the Consultancy Edge. I'm your host, Matt Hodkinson, and today I speak with Isobel Camier. She's the founder of Camier Communications, an expert on helping organisations to better communicate with their staff to attract and retain the very best talent in the workplace. We spoke about how to effectively communicate across your teams so that you can get the very best from your staff, how to recognise their different communication preferences so that you can nurture better relationships. We also discussed the research that Izzy has commissioned into Gen Z. They already make up 20% of the workplace, and that is due to grow massively over the course of the next few years. It's something you absolutely need to know about. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the Consultancy Edge, Isobel Camier.
Hello, thank you for having me on, Matt.
Absolute pleasure. Now, I know that you operate in the space of communications, you're helping people with communication skills, and you train in that area. One of the big challenges I know a lot of our listeners have in the consultancy space is attracting, retaining talent, and being able to maintain great communications with their people. Now, I know that you've done a lot of research into this, but specifically as well, Gen Z. I'm keen to start talking about that. But before we get into that, why should some of our listeners be so concerned with communication and its importance in their consultancy?
Yeah, it's a great place to start. Communications is vital, obviously, in day to day, and it is the bedrock of all good relationships in work and outside of work as well, obviously. Within the workplace, communications is vital for relationships because it can help you build them, it can help you maintain them, it can help you create new ones, and it also helps build trust. Obviously, within the consultancy sphere, it's all about relationships, isn't it? In terms of winning new clients, keeping them on board, retaining them, and keeping that trust. And I firmly believe that the key to that lies in good communication skills.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges you think that consultancies, and I know you work with agencies as well, a very, very similar business model, of course, the importance of communication is just as high there. What are some of the challenges that you find that your clients are having before you work with them, for example?
A variety in terms of communications. And I have to say that possibly they don't recognize that necessarily it's communications before you sort of get under the bonnet. Often when I talk to prospective clients and they know they've got a challenge and they think it's to do with individuals or the team, and they come to me and they present a particular challenge or problem that they're going through with people, and we'll stop talking and I'll ask them, why and what's going on, why again, and why a little bit more. And sure enough, very often it comes down to relationships and a communication problem or lack of, or inability to, or a collision of two different types of people. So I would say that that's the fundamental problem that consultancies often have, but perhaps without even realizing it.
How often is it the case? This has occurred to me. So it's a little bit off piste, but how often is it the case, do you think, that people come to you? Perhaps it's the leadership within an organization. They think they've got problem people or a problem individual in their business. And actually, when you dig deeper, it turns out that the leadership is the problem.
I would say that definitely happens. It's quite a big one to unpick. And certainly, I would say these things are never one way. I would encourage a lot of self-awareness in these conversations. I would encourage a lot of looking about what's going on externally in terms of the relationships within the team. And I would, if I was able to be brought in and to really get under the skin of what the issue is, I would talk to everyone involved and through a lot of coaching skills, maybe get them to understand for themselves perhaps where the issues might lie, And I think it wouldn't be unfair to say that a lot of leadership have been doing and practicing their same ways of working for many years. And hey, there's nothing wrong with perhaps learning a new way of doing things or looking at things from a new perspective. And I think it's at that point that leaders might realize, oh, maybe it's not just the team, but I certainly wouldn't want to put any numbers on this.
Course. I wonder, because a lot of our listeners will be familiar with the kind of whole team dynamics thing. There are different personalities involved in business, of course. So whether it's ColorWorks or Strength Finders, Myers-Briggs, how important is and how accurate, I guess, is that kind of profiling? Can it be applied in every, is it something worth paying attention to?
Yes, I think this is very interesting. There's many different psychometric tests available. The one that I'm accredited in is Insights Discovery. I find it really good for the reason that it's really straightforward model, a very simple language to get used to and to then use in the workplace as well. And there's nothing sort of magical about it. And when I take people through it, they initially think, oh, crikey, this is a bit woo-woo. But once you start sort of showing them the outcomes and what it shows about themselves, the moment where you see the penny drop for them, it's quite incredible because you almost can't argue with it. And that they'll read through their profiles and they're like, wow. So I would say it's very accurate based on the thousands of people I've done it with. But if you're at all intrigued or interested, go and have your profile done, and you can have them done and read it for yourself. And then it's up to you if you want to go forward with it or not. But I think they're very powerful, very transformational in the way that people work. And it can lead to great changes. Just 2 weeks ago, I was working with a regulator, let's say. I possibly can't name them. And I had a large group of people, and one lady who was on the board had come in open-minded, yet perhaps a little bit skeptical. And I had told her, I said, it's pretty transformational. And I think definitely one eyebrow at least went up and sort of like, let's see about that, Izzy. And then by lunchtime, we'd had a morning session together. And during lunchtime, she'd already had a meeting with a person in their team, adapted some of the techniques that we had learned and some of the thoughts I gave her to think about. And after lunch, she came back to me. She's like, I've had that meeting with him. I've tried this, he tried that, and we've sorted it. She's literally like, when can we do the rest of the company? Literally got her diary out because what it does is help you build again that self-awareness. You get to really build your empathy, which is what it's all about. Think about other people. And if that's all it comes down to, brilliant, because that's always going to improve your communication skills and therefore your relationships.
Yeah, I can relate to that penny drop moment. I think whenever I've gone through these profiling tools, you read the report back and you think, oh, that is scarily accurate.
Yeah.
There are elements of this I
Yeah.
recognize in myself.
Yeah.
I guess one of the challenges I've found, and I'm sure others will as well, is as your team grows, it's remembering who is which profile. It's kind of changing your communication style for that individual.
Mm.
Have you got any tips around that? Is it just a case of adopting a sort of broad, acceptable sort of communication style for all, or is it about tailoring to the individual?
Yeah, it's absolutely about adapting 100% because one shoe doesn't fit all. No, that's not quite right. Something like that. It's
Sure.
absolutely about adapting because we all have good days. We all have bad days. So it's very much about recognizing that in others as well. So sometimes we want to be fast paced and get on with things and go, go, go. Other days we might want to sit back and chat more and sort of let the creative ideas collaboratively flow. If that's the same for us, it's undoubtedly the same for others. So we need to have the nous, if you like, to be aware that that's what's going on with others. And if we're able to just shift our behavior a little bit, just a little bit, I'm not asking anyone to change themselves, but if we're doing that and they're doing that, then you're going to meet somewhere more in the middle that's going to benefit for both of you. And that's when a connection happens. And that's when better collaboration happens. And that's when better work happens.
That's amazing. Now, of course, personal individual communication preferences even is one thing. But there's generational considerations as well, aren't there? And I know that you've recently commissioned some research into Gen Z. Now, I guess the first obvious question I have to head off, people will ask this: when were Gen Z born? How old are they now? What is Gen Z?
Yes, so Gen Z refers to the demographic of those born from 1997 to approximately 2010. Now that does vary depending on what you read or what you listen to, but that's approximately who Gen Z are. So it's the demographic who have been in the workforce for around 10 years, but of course they're still entering the workforce as we speak, and will
Right.
carry on to for a while as well.
And these dates, these ranges seem to be getting smaller. Is part of the kind of evolution, I guess, of these and the needs of these generations, as we call them, is that being influenced by technologies, by advances in certain areas, cultural changes and shifts? What do you feel is influencing their communication style and their needs in life generally?
Mm. It's really interesting, and something even since we've done the original research that we're looking into a little bit further, because there is this difference, even if it's just between Gen Z and millennials, who are like the next ones up, if you like, and then it's Gen X. Um, and one of the most fundamental differences is life experience. Sure, it's been different for all of us who've been born in the different generations, but for those who are Gen Z, their life experience has been very different in some really quite stark ways. They are, as is they often referred to, digital natives, you know, totally versed digitally in a way that, you and I couldn't appreciate quite as well. Definitely when I was doing my GCSEs, it was phones were a long way off at that point. But for them, it's just a natural part of it, doing work on iPads, laptops, different platforms, and all of these sort of things. So the way that that has led to a difference in communication is they're obviously far more adept to it. The way that they then communicate, they're a lot more fluent. The language they use is a lot sort of more shorthand, if you like. And even if you just compare that to, say, Gen X and some millennials, they're perhaps a little bit more formal, they're a little bit more structured in their written communications, and perhaps a little less fluid. So I think immediately there's a jarring, and not necessarily obviously everybody, and even when I refer to Gen Z, it has to be clear that it's not all the people born within that time. There's massive polarity within that group. Channel 4 have done some fantastic research on this that really highlights the difference just amongst themselves, without getting too political about it. It's what a lot of it is about. But then that difference compared to those that were born, 20 years before them, the differences in the way they communicate for that just one reason alone is quite stark.
Yeah, and I'm guessing as well. I mean, you mentioned about the changes in life events and their experiences.
Mm.
Is there any research around how the pandemic, for example, influenced that particular generation? Because for many of them, that would have come at a time when perhaps they were entering the workforce,
Mm.
perhaps even earlier as well, when they're completing their education.
Mm.
Is there any kind of nuances there?
Yeah, there's a really interesting point in during their education. A lot of Gen Z were used to, or are used to, within their education, whether it's at school, college, or university, sort of quite instantaneous feedback. If you can think back, maybe, certainly when I was at university, I remember being laughed at for handing in a handwritten essay. I mean, imagine that these days. And I was convinced I should be typing them up, certainly typing them up, and then you wouldn't get feedback for, I don't know, I can't remember that far back, 2, 3 weeks later. But that is completely different now. Everything is submitted online. They receive feedback far quicker, far easier, and that sort of instantaneous gratification almost is something that's sort of carried on with them, and they expect you to respond a lot faster. There's a sort of difference in that time lag, if you like. So there's definitely been a difference there. And also, like I said, in their style of writing, in the way that they write, and the way that they sort of go about even typing, if you like, it has led to many differences. Yeah.
Izzy, I want to come to you shortly to get your observations just generally on the research that you've done, but I feel like I'm leading the witness a little. This will be my last one. One of my observations has been, I guess, this reluctance by elements of Gen Z to go back to the office since
Mm,
the pandemic, for
mm,
example. It might not be the proviso of just Gen Z, of course,
mm.
but I know when I look at it from their perspective, rising costs of transport and costs of living,
Yeah.
and especially in and around major cities like London, for example, we see it exacerbated there. What are your observations on that?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Cost of living, like you say, inflation has had massive impacts. I mean, the cost of rent, we read about it all the time, don't we? Particularly, like you say, in big cities such as London or, Manchester. Um, cost of rent is really high. So I think over 50% of people's pay package or take home money it is going on their rent. And then a huge proportion of that could be or needs to be spent on commuting as well. Commuting is really, really expensive and has gone up a lot. I'm afraid I couldn't actually quote any figures on that. So you can that lived experience and what they're going through is really challenging, really, really challenging, especially when it comes to getting, the sort of job that they want, getting the sort of experiences that they want. There's so much for them to weigh up. And I think there's a massive need and role for leaders of consultancies, agencies, all organizations to have that empathy, to really think what it is like for young people in a pretty anxiety-ridden world, which it is for them. Lots of research tells us how anxious they are, hence why mental well-being is so important to them. I mean, I get that. The world's a pretty crazy place and has been for them for a very long time. So organizations would do well to consider these things. And hybrid working isn't about them being lazy, which is often how they're branded at all. It's because it's really hard to live in the big cities and it's really, really expensive too.
I guess this comes back to communication, is setting that expectation that you're actually holding people accountable to outcomes from their work rather than having to see them visibly in the office beavering away, staring at their screen. So it's a change of shift for the leadership as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a change for leadership. It has always been traditionally, hasn't it, presenteeism. And that's been a big shift for, let's say, the old guard. So there is a massive change for everybody afoot. And that is why I am such an advocate of the need for listening on behalf of leadership, but actually also Jen said as too we need to have the emotional intelligence to understand everyone's viewpoint. Again, it's back to this empathy thing. It's about considering others and what their needs are, what their frames of reference are, so that we can begin to understand each other. We've got to think less about ourselves, be less self-orientated, build trust, which then enables people to work from home. It enables people to understand that you are getting on with the work, but it also understands that you have to come in sometimes and you have to learn from people that have been doing it for the past 20 years. So there's a need for two-way trust. Lots of things are changing.
Yeah, of course. I want to give you the floor now, Izzy. I know that you've done all of this research. I've kind of, come at it from a few different angles, but what are some of your favorite insights and observations from the research that you've done?
Mm. So it all began last year when we were delivering training sessions, and I noticed Gen Z was mentioned again today. Going to another session. Oh yeah, they brought up Gen Z again. And slowly but surely, I suddenly found I was playing kind of like Gen Z bingo in my head. I was like, how long do I give it till someone mentions, points the finger, or wants to discuss Gen Z? And without doubt, I would say it was in 95% of all training sessions. There's clearly something going on here. I am working with people who have got this topic or challenge. I need to understand it. That's why we did the research, which we commissioned of a load of other undertaken research to sort of try and build a picture for ourselves of the main characteristics, values, and preferences, if you like, of Generation Z, which is exactly what we did. The main the main six characteristics that we found are the fact that Gen Z are hugely value driven. They're massively socially aware. I could start by saying that's potentially the one that interested me the most in answer to your question, but I might say that at the end of each of them. So please
Okay.
point it out. Work-life balance is hugely important to them as a tie-in to the importance of mental well-being. Like I said, their life experiences have made it that way.
Mm.
We have been, as a society, talking about mental health now longer, thankfully, we're getting there, than we did certainly when I was a child. I think if you go into schools now, they're discussing feelings and mental well-being in reception year one, at year two. So it's that experience that they're sort of bringing with them. That's new to us, or newish to us, perhaps. So going back to your point about, that need to adapt. The third thing that we found was that growth and development is hugely, hugely important to them. They are, and with many examples that I've been given and that you can read about, they're sort of chomping at the bit. They want to know how to grow. They want the next thing. One piece of research that we found quoted somewhere around 50-60% of Gen Z respondents highlighted that they expect to be promoted at least once a year, which is an interesting statistic, I think. So development is really important to them. The fourth thing that we found was, as we've discussed already, the fact that they're digital natives, so technology and innovation is really, really important. And there's lots of things that consultancies can do around that. The fifth thing that we discovered was that diversity and inclusion is very important, both actually in the workplace. So an organization needs to be practicing these things internally, but also in what they're saying to the outside world or how they're working with others. So their external advocacy, and both things have to reflect each other. There's no room for lip service. A lot of Gen Zs are actually actively looking for places that have a voice in these matters, and they want to see that. They want to be part of somewhere that cares. And then the last pillar, or the last characteristic that we found, was about recognition. They want to be recognized. How can we do that? It's all about valuing regular communication. So much of these six characteristics are or reflect the need for good communication. And just like I said at the beginning, isn't that what all relationships are about? Isn't that what all good business is about? So actually, whilst we've discovered these characteristics and we've recommended some strategies for how to lead Gen Z off the back of them, some of which I'm sure we'll go through, and they're really good for bringing on Gen Z, but actually they're just really good leadership strategies for everybody. So what it comes down to is really good intergenerational leadership.
Yeah, I love that. It strikes me, that gives me a lot of hope, actually, because a lot of those pointers that you're bringing our awareness to speak to a very, I mean, you mentioned it, values driven, ethical, community focused
Yeah.
generation. So I mean, that for me, that gives me a lot of hope. What
Yeah.
was your sort of reaction to that?
Yeah, I totally agree, Matt. So I have heard challenges in regards to Gen Z entering the workplace. There's been people sort of talking about the friction, the misalignment, which I think is actually about a misunderstanding. Sure, there are challenges for new people coming into the workplace. We can all remember the stories 15 years ago or 10 years ago about millennials and their love for avocado on toast kind of a thing. Every generation has it. But I think what Gen Z are bringing is brilliant. The fact that they care, again, don't we need that right now? The world is a pretty volatile place. There's a lot going on. And my God, don't we need some young, invigorated, energized people who care about the world, who care about people, who want to make change, want to make things better. So rather than dismissing them and not employing them, which are stories that you hear, which are terrifying, let's actually bring them in, encourage it. They make up 20% of the workforce today. In a couple of years, they'll be 27% of the workforce. They're not going anywhere. So let's work out how to work with them. Let's work out how to get the best from them. Let's work out how they are going to benefit our businesses the best way. And that, again, it all comes down to communication. And if we can do that, our businesses are going to do better, the planet is going to do better, and society, hopefully, will start doing better.
Yeah, the sooner the better. Yeah, I know that we'd spoken about those statistics beforehand. It surprised me about just exactly how much of the workforce they already make up. And it's great to see that there's that refreshed approach. So Izzy, how are you responding to this research? What are some of your personal sort of actions to come from this, and what has this done for you and for Camier Communications? I mean, has it put you on a bigger stage? What does the future look like for you?
Oh, wow. Yes, good point. So off the back of what we've discovered, we've developed a number of strategies. So, the fact that they're a really value-driven bunch and they're socially aware. What does that mean within an agency or a consultancy? What can they be doing? So, for example, it means there's got to be alignment on their roles to the bigger story of what the company is doing. They need the communication to know how they fit into the bigger part of the machine. So we've built all of these strategies, which are really good. And we've developed a guide that we share with clients or anyone who wants it. So anyone can get in touch and receive a copy absolutely free. It's really beneficial. It's really powerful. We've heard some fantastic stories already of people who have read it and started implementing things, which has been really, really encouraging and really exciting. One lady the other day, her agency, social media agency, they have a 58% Gen Z part of their workforce. So it's a really, really young workforce. And on the back of it, they started doing a lot more listening, which is a huge part of what I'm talking about. Leaders need to stop talking. They need to start listening. Gen Z, what's going on? What do you value? What do you need? What do you want? Do you like these findings? What else do you need? Took it along a few stages, and what has ended up happening, they realized they needed to embrace technology even more. They're a remote company. And what they've started doing is delivering briefs for each other in 30-second video clips and sharing those. So it's a lot quicker, it's a lot easier, it's a lot more fluent. You can see how that reflects the needs that I talked to you about earlier for Gen Z. And it's just a means of adaptation. Now, I'm not sure it's the best way for a brief. For briefings myself, I would always encourage a two-way conversation. However, it's about adapting, trying things, seeing what works, being innovative. So there's a great example of an agency sort of taking on board some suggestions that we've given and giving it a go. So that's what we're doing. That's how we work with agencies and consultancies. And we have a few different workshops where we would come in and work with consultancy, whether it's working actually with the leadership, helping them to understand these findings a bit more, looking at how they work and how they could implement a few things. Remembering again, like I talked about, it's a two-way street. They need to be listening to each other. So let's get the leaders to listen to Gen Z, but similarly, Gen Z have a lot to learn. They're coming into the workplace and there's a lot of experiences that need to be shared. So leadership needs to be really courageous and committed to their communication and being really clear in telling them what is expected, what is needed. And if they're really clear on that at the beginning, Gen Z know where they are, or the younger demographic know where they are. So that onboarding process and the communication then is vital. So I'm encouraging this sort of two-way situation, which is a learning and training forum, if you like. And I come in and facilitate it, coach people through it to help them get to a really good place. So in terms of the vision and where we're going, well, give me a big enough agency that's global, or we love working with local ones as well, and really helping them get the best out of their workforce through the training that we do. That's what we're after.
Amazing. I want to talk about your journey shortly, but before we do that, I recognize the need to attract the right talent, of course, in the first place, but also retain talent. And I know that comes a lot from communication as well. So a lot of of our listeners will be asking the question, how can we attract the right talent? So how, I mean, when it comes to, let's face it, again, you talked about the uplift in Gen Z employment that's going to come in the next couple of years, even
Mm.
almost half again that's coming into the workforce. How can our listeners be more of an attractive proposition for the best talent that's going to come out of the education system in the next few years?
Yeah, it's all about having a really good brand value proposition. And in terms of attracting talent, it's about demonstrating what you can give them, how you can benefit them, you know, for when they are working for you. So what is it that you can offer that ties into what they care about that will help them? So a couple of the things that I mentioned about, if you can demonstrate that you're willing to help them grow and develop, and that is ensuring they have a decent career path, how can you talk about that on social media or on your website, and obviously certainly throughout the recruitment process? What training do you provide? What investment do you provide? Because don't forget, if you're not doing it, there's plenty of other people down the road who are doing it. And that is really attractive to Gen Z. So ensure that you're demonstrating your commitment to them. It's not just about having a beautiful sort of vision of benefit package. How can you also prove it? What are your proof points for showing success stories? Case studies are brilliant. Hearing voices, on your website, or even employer generated content within social media can be a really great way to do it. But you've got to be actually doing it. You can't, again, just be paying lip service to it. So I think it's finding what's right for you, your values for your organization, and then actually living it. And then if you're doing that, shout about it. And if you're an agency, you're probably really great at marketing, apart from often your own consultancy isn't good at doing your own. I do recognize that sort of cobbler's problem.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you can shout about it, which you absolutely should be doing, that is a brilliant way to attract them. Think about your audience. I don't need to teach that to marketing consultancies, but where is your audience? What do they want? What do they need? And adapt to that. So that the right message is being picked up by the right people, so that the right people come to you, and then you'll have a great pool of people to choose from in a recruitment process.
That's excellent advice. Izzy, as I say, I want to learn about your journey as well. So what led to you becoming a communication expert, and then of course forming your own agency / training consultancy in this space?
So I started out in PR and comms about 20 years ago. And I was very fortunate to start in a small, very small agency in Warwick, which is near where I grew up, and led by a brilliant guy called Richard Postins. And I was lucky because it was small. I did everything from the word go. I didn't realize I was running client budgets, but I was. Which in big agencies you don't do for years. Sure, I was taking press releases to the post box. I can't believe I actually did that. It's that long ago. I know, right? But I was also I was bringing in journalists from the Times to talk to really big talent that we'd got on, on campaigns that we were working. I was going to new business pitches. At that age, I didn't really realize what I was doing. I was just doing it and I loved it. So that was a really great start for me. I then did a year at the Daily Mail, but we don't need to talk about that. Sorry. And then I decided to leave journalism and go back to PR because I'd really enjoyed it. So I went to a big PR agency, WPP one, for about 6 years. And that's where I really got sort of stuck in, if you like. I did start at the bottom, work my way up, worked all the long hours, which I don't think you would do anymore, actually. Learned the hard way. It was brilliant. I did both consumer and B2B kind of PR. I then realized that one day I hoped to have my own business. I have no idea what that was yet, but I thought that a 360 view of comms would be beneficial. It was at that point I worked in Formula One. I worked my way up within the communications team there, ended up leading the communications and the partnerships team. So traveled the world a lot for a few years, which was obviously quite the experience. Plenty of adapting and connecting with different people required during those few years, that's for sure. It was a real education. But it also coincided with the time that I started a family. And being away for 150 days of the year didn't tie in with the kind of mum and wife that I wanted to be. So left Formula One, focused on the kids, and then 5 years ago I set this up. So my communications training consultancy, the theory being I'd had this massive education in communications, which actually was about relationships. When I was working both agency side and in-house, it was all about, what the client needed, just about those relationships point that I mentioned before. I then did a lot of training, weirdly, when I was in the Formula One team, whether it was media training with the drivers, whether it was sort of training the sponsors in terms of what they could expect from the package and how to get the best out of it. So when I was mulling things over, like how can I work for myself? Because I wanted to be in control, quite frankly, so I could be with my kids as much as I wanted to be, while still working. So I was like, training, that's it, that's the one. So 5 years ago, that's what I did. I set it up. I became a trainer with the CIPR, Chartered Institute of Public Relations, who I still deliver a range of courses for. That's where I began. I started doing a lot more associate work and started building up my own clients over time. And that's how I've got to where I am.
Amazing. What a rich experience. And I wouldn't worry about the Daily Mail. We've all got blips on our CV.
Brought it up again.
During my consultancy days, I did a 3-month stint at Enron. So we've all got those marks on our record. Can I ask as well? You're involved in something called the Girls Network. Tell us more about that.
Yes, I can. So I'm a massive advocate of people who've had a bit of experience sharing it. I think it's brilliant. I have benefited from mentor programs a couple of times, and have done not necessarily done well out of it, but I've learned a lot. I'm also a huge advocate of obviously supporting women in the workplace, for all the reasons that we know about, and also I just think it's the right thing to be doing, and I love it. So the Girls Network was set up so that girls from perhaps less privileged backgrounds, or those that wouldn't have had the opportunity to maybe have close family members that might have entered professions, or perhaps wouldn't have had the conversations at home, that wouldn't have encouraged certain job aspirations. And this is meant to sort of help that gap, if you like. So as mentors, we go into schools, we build up relationships with a girl. They choose which mentor they want. And then over the course of a year, you have I can't remember the number, 9 or 10 meetings with her, and you talk through her and her aspirations and her hopes. And based on my experience, I try and help, I try and support, I try and give guidance. And it's awesome. It's brilliant. Love it.
Fantastic. That's really great to hear. Right, Izzy, we're at that moment where we ask snog, marry, avoid. This is our regular feature. Now, a snog is a quick win in business that you would recommend that people adopt. So let's start with that. What's your quick win? What's your snog?
Quick win is reduce all your communications. So whether you are jumping on a Zoom call after this, whether you're writing an email to someone, reduce whatever you're saying or writing by at least a third. Just as quick as that. The best phrase you can live by is short paragraphs, short sentences, short words. Cut everything down, and your communication will be a lot stronger for it. And we can all do that straight away.
I love the idea of short Zoom calls as well. I'm going to implement that one. What's a marry? What's something that you would implement in your business for the long term for the greatest effect?
Both for me and also for those that I work with, is to lead with curiosity. I'm sure I have mentioned this already today, but keep asking questions, not any questions, good questions, open questions. Ask more. If we can all lead, especially leaders within organizations, with curiosity and we keep asking more, we're going to need to listen. So listen really, really well. And why should you be doing that? It's because you're gathering information, knowledge, and data all the time. And if you are able to do that, sit back and listen, the more data that you have, the better the solution will be that you are able to present to your client or to your team, because you'll know more. It's as simple as that. And it's in most interactions. We're all so keen to demonstrate our knowledge. And at this point, I should stop talking. We all want to show how much we know, but the best leader does more listening.
And lastly, avoid. What would you ditch tomorrow to make your business even more prosperous, successful, in whatever context?
Whatever context, so whether it's me or for anyone else, a really important thing to avoid is burning bridges. So this comes back to, as I began relationship building, you've got to build relationships, you've got to be able to maintain them and build trust with people. Your network needs and should keep growing. I mean, thank God for LinkedIn these days, because, it really helps you stay at least a bit in touch with people. At least you've almost got a record of them. I wish I'd had this 20 years ago. But if you burn bridges, you're only going to cause yourself problems. So, because the world's very small, you never know when you're going to come across people again. So maintain relationships, don't burn bridges, and it will really serve you in the long term for sure.
Izzy, that's been amazing. I've learned so much in talking with you today, and I know that our listeners will have as well. So thank you so much for joining us on the Consultancy Edge today.
Thank you very much for having me, Matt. It's been a pleasure.